Hey, everybody. Welcome to this emergency episode of the College Football Insiders. I'm Brandon Marcello, joined by Shahan Jayaraja and Richard Johnson. We are live on YouTube on a Sunday night and live via tape delay wherever you get your podcast. Brian Kelly has been fired at LSU, a surprising development that no one quite expected this morning. In fact, when we did our podcast earlier this morning, we were talking about, I mentioned, hey, LSU Oklahoma could be the hot seat bowl. And we're all like, well, maybe not. Maybe a hot seat bowl for next year. So I called it a hot seat primary. Well, we didn't know at the time that Brian Kelly would have a meeting to discuss maybe some staff changes. And apparently it got kind of heated with his athletics director. And that from that point, everything devolved or evolved to the situation we're in now, where LSU called a team meeting for 8 p.m. Central Time to tell their players, you do not have a head coach named Brian Kelly anymore, and we are lifting up, as expected, Frank Wilson, the running backs coach, who has some head coaching experience himself. In the interim here, guys, shocking news, but in this weird coaching cycle, we expected some crazy, weird moves, and this is certainly one of them.
It's crazy. I mean, to be sitting here right now after the expectations that LSU had coming into the year it's jarring, right? I picked LSU to win the national championship after they reeled in the number one recruiting class in the country. They had a guy who was seen as QB1 in Garrett Nussmeier. They had a couple guys on defense, including Mansour Delane, who have grown into potential first-round picks. But even though they finally got over that week one hump, beating Clemson in the opener, it's just fallen back to earth. And I think that moment in the night game at Death Valley against Texas A&M, where they're booing this program, where they're chanting "Fire Kelly," where they're going down by more than 30 points, like, it was a moment that I guess the athletic department felt like was too much to come back from. And so LSU becomes, I think, the new top program in the coaching carousel, and a very unexpected one, especially with the contract that they gave out when he came here in 2021.
Yeah, it's funny about that recruiting class, and producer Aaron has a very funny note. I bet Bryce Underwood's pretty happy with the decision that he made, even if we don't know whether it's going to work out long-term for Sharon Moore. But that is a different story that hopefully we will get to in a future coaching cycle. For God's sakes, please, not this one. I think, and Brandon, you kind of brought it up, I don't think Brian Kelly came into this day thinking he would be fired, right? Like, and I know you may roll your eyes on that, but like, I think Billy Napier went into last Sunday, 100%. But I don't think Brian Kelly came into today thinking he'd be fired. I think Brian Kelly came in today thinking, I'll fire a coordinator or both. We'll make some staff changes. We'll rejigger some stuff. Maybe we'll come around to it in December and we'll talk this out and we'll make some changes. And you'll give me some more resources or whatever. I don't know what happened in the mythical meeting with him and Scott Woodward today. I have no idea. I'm sure we'll all report it out over the coming days and weeks. But yeah, that kind of seems to be what changed. The tenor of the day changed in the late afternoon from Brian Kelly's probably going to get rid of one or two coordinators to, Brian Kelly is going to be the one who is himself gotten rid of. Some things to consider here. Obviously, LSU, Louisiana State University, does not have a president right now, permanent president right now. They're going through that. I have a pretty open question about Scott Woodward, the athletic director's thing here, as the person who doled out this giant contract to Brian Kelly. It's pretty clear that the governor of the state of Louisiana got involved. Like, that's the echelon of I don't want to say meddling, but maybe meddling's the word. The echelon of people who got their
it's LSU, it's meddling.
Here. Sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. After last night's game, the governor himself, Jeff Landry, got onto social media and put out a message about the report from the Baton Rouge Advocate, New Orleans Advocate, that they're going to raise ticket prices. And he sent it on social media, quote, I think LSU and the LSU Board of Supervisors needs to rethink their actions to raise ticket prices for next year after tonight's showing. Now, as we said, the president, they're in between presidents at LSU. So because it's a public university in the state there, the governor can get involved. And he did get involved today, reportedly, as they were discussing how to move on from Brian Kelly and what the next process with all this is going to be. But I'll tell you this much right now. I mean, that governor, just from being at one press conference with him back, if you guys remember, the Sugar Bowl was delayed a day because of the attack in New Orleans. he's very much along the lines of politics these days. Just, I'm going to say what's on my mind and no filter. And that's very much how that social media post read to me last night. And now that he's involved, I'm certain that his voice carries a lot of weight in that room. And it's fascinating because we mentioned, maybe this buyout will be negotiated down. It could be mitigated, obviously, if he goes get another job or whatever. But Scott Woodward is directly responsible for the two biggest buyouts in college football history. Jimbo Fisher, who was rumored at the time when he was at A&M as a candidate at LSU, well, he got that big raise there at Texas A&M in a guaranteeing contract and renegotiations because of that, because of Scott Woodward having that out there. And then, of course, Brian Kelly now sitting there with a $53.8 million buyout. That will likely come down, even in negotiations based off of what we're hearing. But it's crazy to think that we are already in a spot where two of the three largest buyouts in history have all occurred this season before November. We are up to $167.9 million of committed money to buyouts among FBS coaches. We're up to 11 openings right now. There will be more. We know that. It's crazy. And again, I just don't know where the money's coming from. That's not my area of expertise, but
I don't know that they do either, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back for 1 second to what you said about, kind of the governor and the way that he acts and this sort of stuff. I mean, you can make a pretty good case and you can draw a pretty straight line that Louisiana politics is kind of the incubator of a lot of this sort of stuff over the past 100 years. I mean, we can go all the way back to Huey Long if we want to. We don't have to do that on
Huey
this
Long reference. Ding! There it is.
Yes. Don't worry. I'm full of them. But here's the reality, right? Is that LSU is obviously the signature university in the state of Louisiana. And because of that, it's also the biggest political force in the state of Louisiana. When this thing isn't working, crazy people start getting involved, right? You mentioned obviously the governor, but every state politician is going to get involved. And this was one thing that, even if you want to go back to the hiring of Brian Kelly, that I think that he was unprepared for, is just the amount of noise and attention and all this sort of stuff that comes with being the head coach at Louisiana State University. And, I think it's so interesting to look back at some of these hires, let's say between 2019 and 2022, because they were hired at the moment where NIL comes into the picture, where the transfer portal comes into the picture, now where RevShare has come into the picture, where the rules have changed numerous times. And so, I mean, from that perspective, I mean, I do have a little bit, I don't want to, sympathy is too strong a word because he's getting a lot of money to go away. But a lot of these coaches, especially the ones that are getting fired right now, they are put in really weird positions over the past couple of years. And it makes for a really interesting situation for whoever comes in next.
Yeah. You had a question here in the chat with Dwayne Dotson. Why does Scott Woodward still have a job? He hired the guy and wrote that awful contract. Well, as we know, we discussed, and I wrote a story about this as well, about the buyout bubble. The ADs answer to the president of the school, the university, and they answer to the board of trustees. And the board of trustees are usually made of people who have political ties, people who have ties to the school, obviously. Some of them are just diehard fans, and some of their emotions cloud their judgments in usual good business sense. And that's what you get into. It's just if they decide and focus on a guy that they think can do everything immediately, they want him, and they tell the AD, do whatever really you have to do to get him, and we'll approve the contract. It's up to them to approve the contract. It's not the athletics director.
John, how was your afternoon? Nice, and you have a good lunch?
John Talty has joined us.
You have dinner plans?
I actually just had my first food of the day 5 minutes ago. So it's been one of those kind of days. So just happy to pop in for a second. And what are we talking about, guys? The coaching happened? Is that what happened today?
Wow, we're just talking about BK. Have it your way. You didn't have that for dinner, did you?
No, I didn't. I kind of should have in honor of it.
Yeah. Don't worry. I'm sure our boss, Jack Crosby, has gotten into that. He is apparently a big Burger King aficionado.
Wow.
That's good to know. Well, here's what's, and we're talking about the expectations at LSU. The last 3 national championships they won, the head coach was either in their 3rd or 4th season. Brian Kelly was in his 4th season. very obviously weren't even going to make the playoffs. So you want to be able to win a national championship. So it obviously just sends the message to whoever the next coach is you better win a freaking national championship within 4 years or we're going to fire you. That's quite the prerequisite, the job requirement for a place like that, especially in this new age when the playing field has almost been leveled to a certain extent. How do we think here, just the interim here real quick, how do we think LSU, the players, this team responds down the rest of the way? Because they're in a bye week, but then they go to Bama.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Wilson's a popular guy. He's been a great recruiter for a long time. And, you know, I don't think I'm the only one, but have written in the past about there's been some disconnect between Brian Kelly and the players. I don't think that's a shock. Brian Kelly, an old school guy. There's been plenty of viral moments of him screaming at people on sidelines and
dancing.
You know, when you're winning, that's okay. There's plenty of tough nosed coaches out there, but when it's not going well, then that's when people start to tune you out. So, you know, it's kind of the classic, like, you know, pop after a coaching fire. You see sometimes that happen at the NFL level, college level. So it wouldn't shock me to see them maybe come out with a little bit more life against Bama. But this is a team that has a lot of flaws in a lot of ways that we talked about earlier today before we knew Brian Kelly was getting fired. So I don't think that just firing Brian Kelly fixes all of that.
John,
Unless
I'm just like, John, because you were kind of boots on the ground on this kind of all day and like way before I think some of the rest of us were. Like, at what point in time in the day did your own understanding of the situation shift from it's not just Joe Sloan to it's Brian we're talking about here?
Yeah, this afternoon. I'm trying to think of the exact time that I probably got a text, but I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my phone to see when the first one came through. But there was definitely like eye emoji, like, you know, keep an eye on Baton Rouge type thing. And I think a lot of us thought, and I would guess that even the primary people involved in this story, Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward, were expecting there to be staff changes today, and that was going to be the extent of it. Now, I'm not Brian Kelly or Scott Woodward, so I can't speak for them, but certainly that is my understanding of how things were going to play out today. We talked about it on the show earlier today, but when a meeting can go bad, it can change the direction. And was texting someone earlier, like, these are two fiery guys, and you could imagine you get the two of them in a room and you start kind of pushing back and forth at each other, and maybe you say some things you shouldn't have said, and it can start devolving from there. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever done it. I know some people who have been like, all right, just fire me if that's what you want to do. And then sometimes people call your bluff. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened, but, you know, you can see how things can get leveled up very quickly. And I think that was the case here, where there's some ego, some emotion. And, you know, was just texting someone earlier right before jumping on here, like, this person was like, I don't know that LSU has a plan here. And I think that's the kind of the big question. It's like, I don't think that they are like have this big drawn out plan. They have all these people, you know, pulling in different directions. I think you guys were talking about the governor earlier. Like, it's a unique situation. And typically when there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, that's when a search gets wonky.
We're going to get more into this, the future for LSU, potential candidates, how this all came to be, how quickly it happened. Much more right after this here on the College Football Insiders.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
We're back here on the emergency episode of the College Football Insiders. Brian Kelly out as coach at LSU. Brian Kelly, now the shortest tenured LSU head coach since Curly Hallman in 1991 through 1994. You know, we've seen this here in recent history in the SEC, just kind of a culture clash. You bring in a coach who's just never really been in the Southeast, and it just doesn't work out. Brian Harsin at Auburn, and now Brian Kelly at LSU. Now going back into just how quickly this all kind of devolved today, John, when this all comes to be, how do you think an athletic director, especially one as seasoned as Scott Wood, handles this in the coming days moving forward and trying to get a good plan together?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're having a team meeting as we speak right now, and so we'll be curious to see what the word is after that. That's going to be an opportunity for presumably Scott Woodward and others to address. Here's what happened. Here's what our plan is moving forward. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of insight from that coming out of here pretty soon. But you're going to have to get moving pretty fast in terms of figuring out what your game plan is. I mean, it's early enough that you're a month out from probably having to make a hire, so it gives you time to get some of your ducks in the row. But again, I think this is a unique one with no permanent president. You've got board of supervisor, level of involvement here. You got the governor involved. It just makes it a little bit trickier. And I think that LSU potentially runs into the same conundrum that we were talking about earlier today, where a lot of the top guys that they're interested in might be playing in the playoff. And are you willing to wait for them? And what I get, and I'm curious what you guys are hearing, but when I text various what we call industry sources, I get the same thing over and over again, that just don't really see it happening, that it would just be very, very hard to wait that long. And even someone just telling me ADs get so nervous about these hires, there's so much pressure on them that to imagine them waiting more than a month on someone with all the questions and pressure that you would face as an AD from all of your constituents, just very hard to do.
The thing that I heard in the immediacy after he got fired was the same thing that we had heard before LSU opened, which is, and I quote from a source, there aren't near enough good candidates for all of this. Okay, sources tell me that Penn State, Florida, and LSU will have a head coach next Labor Day weekend when they take the field. So it will take a medium to long term to truly decide whether that coach can or cannot win in those three jobs and whatever jobs we have to come, Arkansas, UCLA, et cetera. But at the end of the day, in the very short term, the next 2 months, people are going to be disappointed because a couple of these schools are going to lose press conference. Now, personally, I don't really care about losing a press conference with my team. I would like my team to win football games. That's just me personally. But if you're a person who deeply cares about winning a press conference, and there are a lot of you, you may want to understand that you're about to be pretty disappointed here, just as far as a law of averages, because your school's either going to hire a head coach that you feel to be underwhelming or not befitting of your job, Penn State fans, Florida fans, LSU fans, or they're going to hire a coordinator, which you feel is probably not befitting of your job, LSU, Florida fans, and Penn State fans. So just get ready.
And I will say too, right? You want to talk about guys who love winning the press conference. Let's talk about Scott Woodward, the athletic director at LSU. I've got a piece coming out later today that kind of gets a little more into this, but so much of reaching this moment at LSU was the way that they approached the 2021 coaching search, where they take a giant swing at Lincoln Riley, where obviously they're getting in touch with, James Franklin and Jimbo Fisher and getting all these other guys raises. And then they kind of take the first big yes that they can get in Brian Kelly, someone who at the time people scratched their head that they hired. And it'll be fascinating because, Scott Woodward's still the AD at LSU. Obviously we'll kind of see what role he has in the hiring, if it's fully him, if he has a lot of influence from outside. But there
are open questions about that right now, I would say, in the industry.
I'm sure. I mean, again, the last two hires that you made resulted in the biggest buyouts in history. That is not something that you can just ignore. And so I think part of the question becomes, okay, you know what? You did your big game hunting. It went terribly for you. Is there another way to approach this? Is Scott Woodward capable of trying something different? I mean, even if you go back to his time at Washington, again, they've from the beginning, that's been his MO. Even with the women's basketball coach bringing over Kim Mulkey, constantly, that's been his MO. I'm curious, what does a successful coaching search look like that doesn't just devolve the way that the 2021 one did?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Brandon. I think you're getting to, whatever apocalyptic, that's happening.
Yeah, I do think that if Scott Woodward is directly involved, I would assume, and John, you tell me, that they'll try to swing big again. They'll try to go get a big name, a splash.
Yeah. The thing that's that's interesting too is like you're hitting on Sean, but like he doesn't get enough credit for this, or maybe discredit. But like, not only did he obviously hire Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, and they gave them that big initial deal, but you guys remember he was going after Jimbo so hard that year to hire him at LSU, which led to A&M having to give Jimbo that raise and extension. So he like did A&M double dirty on Jimbo because of how bad he wanted to hire Jimbo at LSU.
I do have a silly thing that we should note here. Look, we have talked about the fact that if you were Jimbo, you would take your buyout to a specific job and say, I've got all this buyout money, don't pay me that much, put it to the roster and the assistant pool. You know,
Are we finally getting Scott Woodward landing Jimbo at LSU? Like,
This was the long play all along, wasn't it?
longest play.
Yeah, the
I
long
will say
con.
this is kind of an interesting side plot right now, though, in the coaching carousel. Is there like some really decent coaches who are just kind of out there right now? Like Brian Kelly's a good coach. We'll see. Well, maybe he takes some time off. I have no idea. But like Brian Kelly's a legitimately good coach. James Franklin is a legitimately good coach. Jimbo Fisher has been in the past a legitimately good coach. I mean, there might be some bargain bin shopping available to some of these second and third tier jobs. I mean, I was even I don't know if he'll get a quick turnaround with the way things ended, but like Billy Napier was somebody who was very highly regarded a couple of years ago, and he wasn't fit for this level, but he also has had a lot of success at other levels. I'm kind of curious to see that second order effect of where the quite good coaches who are getting let go ultimately end up.
Yeah. Let's talk candidates, because as we said, LSU probably doesn't have an idea really right now, but that doesn't stop us from looking at connections and potential splash hires. One, just judging based off the pass of Scott Woodward. And our Chris Hummer has a piece up right now at cbssports.com listing some of the top candidates here. The name at the top, of course, is Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. Everybody wants him. Can they get him? Especially with Ole Miss trajectory right now to go in the playoff. I mean, are you willing to wait? Another name, Joe Brady, the former offensive coordinator for the national championship Tigers in 2019, now with the Buffalo Bills. Heck, you heard his name just a little bit, even with Penn State, with some of the connections there. James Franklin, former Penn State coach, now unemployed. John Summerall at Tulane. Now, this is an interesting subject because much like Billy Napier 4 or 5 years ago, this was someone that a lot of people would say that just makes sense for him to go to LSU. But LSU was like, nah, we're not hiring the in-state dude to come here to LSU. We're above that. So he went to Florida. So would John Summerall really even get a fair sniff there at LSU? Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame. Hey, let's just keep taking coaches from Notre Dame until it works. Jimbo Fisher is one that he's mentioned on here. And then we talk about splash hires that might be stretches. We'll just throw these out there. Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban. Would you think, could you tell Nick Saban, hey, 3-year contract, $80 million. Just be here 3 years. What is the championship?
I mean, honestly, I think they should do that. I think that he also, I think probably somewhat facetiously, but did say like, basically don't let Jimmy Sexton around my wife when she starts hearing these numbers. Like if I'm LSU, I'm always throwing a big number out there. Like, yeah, $20 million a year, 3 years, come in here. Let's get it back rolling again. He's talked very lovingly and openly about how much he loved his time at LSU, how he regrets leaving. Listen, do I think it's going to happen? No. But if you're talking about big splashes, when we go down through that list, in my mind, and I'm not an LSU fan, but from texting a couple people trying to get a sense, like with what that fan base expects, there's like 3 names on that list that I think would really resonate. And I think it's Lane Kiffin. I think it's Marcus Freeman. I think it's Nick Saban. I think you get past those 3, even a guy like Dabo, which would be an unbelievable coach steal. Is LSU fans throwing, parties for Dabo? I don't think they are, based on where he stands right now.
Well, LSU
the
fans
bar is so high
no
in terms of what they have to hire.
Yeah, right. No, yeah.
Never lost a tailgate.
Sorry, I'm trying to be funny.
Guys, there is not only one person that can win at LSU, Florida, or Penn State. That class of job. Like, there are so many guys who can win in those jobs. Now, I understand it is much easier said than done. And I understand that there are a lot of guys that could do it, but Brian Kelly couldn't, for instance. But like, I just personally go crazy with this notion of like zeroing in on one candidate. It's got to be one guy. It has to be Matt Rule. It has to, for Penn State, it has to be Lane Kiffin. Like, that is just so insane to me, especially because, like, where is your contingency plan when you just spent $50 million to get the guy out to then go put all your eggs in one basket for a guy who has every ounce of leverage over you in such a situation?
And that literal thing is why we're sitting here with Brian Kelly, by the way, because they did that with Jimbo Fisher and Lincoln Riley. And all of a sudden it's, well, you got to live up to the expectation of what you set forth. And now we're sitting here with a hire that I think at the time everybody thought was a little odd.
Yeah. It's like dating. You're just big talking, you're peacocking out there, and then all of a sudden you got to spend a lot of money, and then they dump you anyway. But I think,
you okay there, Brandon?
That took a dark turn.
Listen, I was dumped at an IHOP once. She's now my wife, by the way.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
We're getting that story offline.
Yeah, there's some stories I could. Yeah, but anyway.
That's inside of After Dark.
Does this firing and the buyout, does it deter any other programs in the region from making the similar decision, especially at a place like Florida State, where Mike Norvell has a similar buyout in size and would be going probably against LSU, maybe even at Auburn, Florida, for similar candidates?
We've been talking about this on the show. I think there are multiple programs that I can think of, and I won't name all of them, but there are multiple that I know of that I think would really love for their guy to win out so they don't have to get into this cycle.
Or win like two, not even win
right,
out.
Yeah, for sure. There are some that's just win one or two, and we can just say, let's kick this can down the road. I think that there is an understanding, as Richard said, and others have said, there are not enough good candidates to go around this cycle. And you have to also think, not only do we have the current jobs open right now, but if there are some big coach steals, which we think there probably will be, that creates more dominoes, which might still be better jobs than what you have. So for some of these places, I think, again, there's probably already some regret that you didn't make a move a year ago. Certainly if I were Florida, I'm probably thinking maybe we should have just gotten rid of Billy a year ago, and we would have been the belle of the ball. And now we're going to be fighting LSU and Penn State for guys. That's probably not ideal. But if you're maybe a smaller program, say you're a program in that, I don't know, below Florida and in from Florida to Virginia Tech range, that I think especially is that danger zone of like, we're going to have to take a leap on somebody or have to really make a projection, or maybe we're hiring a guy who had one good year and we really hope it works for us. I just think it gets thin. There's plenty of great coaches. I'm not saying there aren't, but in terms of guys who feel viable in this moment, it is thinner than probably what the market already is. And that's not even, as you said, Brandon, Auburn, Florida State, some others that could still come open.
It's going to be interesting, too, because like we've talked about extensively, there are not enough good candidates for good jobs. But the thing I'm really interested by, and maybe it'll be nothing, is sometimes when that's the case, you see programs get creative. And sometimes those creative decisions work, right? I mean, by the time that he got the job, he was good. But like Kurt Cignetti at Indiana was not supposed to be a splash hire, right?
Well,
we talked this morning.
Playoffs in a row, obviously.
Yeah, and we talked this morning about the unique circumstances of Lance Leipold at Kansas, right? Like they go out and get the Buffalo coach who won titles at Division III Wisconsin Whitewater. Like I think that there is a way that, and it won't be for everybody. They're gonna, probably 2/3 of the programs that make these hires are going to. It's just the reality of the business, right? They're not gonna hit. But I am curious if we see programs get a little further down their list than we expect and bring in some interesting coaches who have done some interesting things. We've talked offline a little bit, like, man, Rice made a really interesting hire in Scott Abel, and he's kind of doing some stuff that's interesting, right? I mean, Temple with Casey Keeler. I mean, I don't think anybody would have necessarily drawn that up at the beginning of last year. Well, they're 5-3 right now. I've obviously been harping a lot on the Signetti type hires, I guess you could say, guys who have come up through D2 and FC. And by the way, Brian Kelly is one of those guys historically, but it's been a minute. But I mean, again, there are so many interesting candidates right now for programs that are willing to think outside the box. And maybe this forces it to happen because of the sheer amount of openings. I mean, we could be pushing 15, 20 just at the power conference level.
But Shahan, I think that's going to be good for some of these programs to take their medicine and lose the press conference,
Definitely.
but win games in the long run.
Game.
Like Bob Chesney sitting there at James Madison can win you football games. Yeah. Absolutely. At a higher level than he is at. No disrespect to James Madison. I'm sorry. But he's a guy who you can go get, and nobody's heard of him, so he's not going to win your press conference. But does he give you a good chance to develop quality football players and win football games? I personally believe that he does. That's where we get into this conversation where, again, it's not just the flashy guy who's going to win the press conference and win you a lot of interviews with idiots like us over the next 10 months. It's the guy who, when Toe actually meets leather.
I talked to Bob Chesney 2 years ago for a story. Come on now. Come on. We at CBS Sports, we love talking to Jason Eck, and we love talking to, whoever, I don't know. I can't think of anybody else, but we love talking to those guys. It's those other idiots that you're talking about.
I'll say to push back on this, and I don't disagree with what anybody is saying, and I do sometimes think if I was an AD, how would I do things, right? And it would probably be differently than how some of them do. Classic hindsight. But as you guys know, especially at the big programs, there is tremendous amount of pressure to hire a guy who makes everyone feel happy. And it's easier at Indiana to take a swing on Curt Cignetti because you could say, we've tried all these other things. It hasn't worked. Let's take a swing. What's the worst that could happen? If you're Florida or LSU and you make a guy who just bombs out in a year or two, you're also getting fired. And there's risk there. And there's trustees and boosters and all these other people who put a lot of pressure. Again, I live in the South, so I'll speak more to the South. In the SEC especially, there are a lot of people who get involved and care a lot about who that hire is. And you can hurt your own job security if you don't hire a certain kind of guy at times. And I think people mostly operate out of keeping their own jobs. And so I think that's why you see people stay in similar boxes.
And I agree with, I'm not even going to disagree with you on that, John, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, if they're going to fire you anyway as an AD after a hire and a half.
And a good buyout.
You know what I'm saying?
And I do want to follow up, actually. I like that point that you bring up. Because one, I've said before, I feel like SEC athletic directors oftentimes would rather lose their way than win another way because you don't get scrutiny that same way, like you said. But the other thing is this. It's interesting to look at college football in this moment, right? It's no secret. The last 2 years, there have been 0 SEC teams to play for national titles. The Big Ten has won 2 consecutive national titles. And it's kind of a moment right now in college football where I wonder, is this ultimate urgency, this lack of patience, is it something that's going to hold the SEC back when it comes to competing at the highest levels? You've got programs like Michigan, which restructured Jim Harbaugh's contract and gave him a second act. You have situations like Ohio State where they went all in on Ryan Day and said, we're giving you what it takes. And again, you look at the programs right now that are at the top of the national championship board: Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. And by the way, we can even throw Texas A&M into that as kind of an interesting counter to these very top programs right now. It's the ones who have long-term plans and didn't try to win the press conference. I was down there at Kyle Field when they introduced Mike Elko, and Ross Bjork, the athletic director at the time, said, essentially, we can't do what we just did ever again. And actually, if you look at Mike Elko's contract, he has a contract that's $7 million base salary and is incredibly incentive laden. Now, when Penn State and LSU and all these guys go after him, that might change. But he actually, again, he has a $7 million base contract, which is pretty low relative to the SEC.
Well, it ain't fully guaranteed like the last guy's was.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge part of it. And then the other thing too, I believe if they make the playoff, he gets $1 million. If they win a national title, he makes $3.5 million for winning the national title, right? So, and Ross Bjork said at the time, and now he's obviously gone, there's a whole other conversation, but they were basically like, we want this to be a place where you have to earn it. And we want people who want to earn it. And I look at the state of some of the top programs in the SEC right now, and I see places where, again, they are more focused on optics than necessarily on doing what's best long-term for their football programs.
Yep. Same way of thinking is the old way of thinking. As we were talking here, LSU has confirmed that Brian Kelly has been fired. They also confirm in a statement released that the terms of the separation are still being negotiated. Again, as we mentioned, that buyout on the contract reads as $53.8 million, but that will likely change here as they discuss things. And also, according to that contract, it could be offset by whatever future earnings he has in the coaching industry, which it'll be interesting to see if he goes after another job or decides to sit out a year or something along those lines. Also, the athletics director, Scott Woodward, released a statement, which if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see on your screen, and I will read little bits and pieces here. As a proud alum and as the current caretaker of our athletics program, I will not compromise in our pursuit of excellence, and we will not lower our standards. I continue to believe that LSU is the best football program in our America, and that our head coach position is among the best considering our investment, our ability to attract and retain talent, blah, 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 blah. We will begin a national search for a new head football coach, and I'm confident in our ability to bring to Baton Rouge an outstanding leader. While there will be certainly be speculation, reports on candidates and the process, together we will celebrate and welcome a new coach at the appropriate time. They don't have a plan, guys. That's kind of how I read it. We're getting everything in a row, our ducks in a row and everything. And listen, like we said, how can you have a plan really at this moment? Because we went into this morning not expecting this to happen. But when tempers flare and you don't see eye to eye, it's probably best to move on. And who could have foreseen this happening with a coach who came in and started saying family and I think
there's a very interesting line in the statement, Brandon, that says, I'm confident in our ability, blah, 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 to find somebody who fits our culture and community and who embraces the excellence. We're
all trying to find the guy who did this.
We demand. I will say this. I do think the Brian Kelly doesn't fit our community and doesn't fit our way of life is pretty overstated. Because at the end of the day, if he would have won, you would have made it fit. Guess what, guys? Mike Elko don't know a damn thing about College Station, Texas before he got there.
He was there under Jimbo.
Before he got there the first time. And then he got there. He got to know him a little bit. He came in and he won. Win games, and they will figure out a way to fit the culture around you. I promise you.
Here's the one thing I'll say to push back on this. I don't disagree with some of what you're saying, but I do think at a place like LSU, they don't necessarily care where you're from. They just want you to be authentic. And I think there were questions from the beginning as to whether Brian Kelly was authentic and how he approached people. And I think he has a rep for being transactional and maybe not being, I don't even need to add a qualifier, not the warmest guy. And so, listen,
that I think is
point.
Not
Nick
Saban with the homies.
Nick Saban fits a lot of those things too, and he won. So yeah, if you win, it would have calmed things. But like you guys, I'm sure heard early on, was not necessarily recruiting a lot of LSU, a lot of Louisiana kids. That pissed people off, and there were just all these little moments along the way that are not the reason necessarily why you win or lose. But if you are not winning to the level that they expect you to, get used against you in moments like this. And I don't think he did himself many favors in his time there.
And I'll say this, right? I don't think that fit in terms of personality and culture and all this is everything, but I think that it buys you more time than if you're not. If you are slightly not working and you don't fit and you don't feel good in the community, I mean, I think that even, to different extents, people at Penn State felt this about James Franklin, that he wasn't very involved in the community, that he was, all this sort of stuff in terms of like personality wise. I think that matters. Whereas, it's funny, right? Obviously, I've been around Baylor for a long time. Like Matt Rule showing up, who did not fit culturally, but showing up and being very forward and saying, I'm going to become part of you. That stuff does matter. And I think it especially matters in football hungry places in a way that maybe, just frankly, even a lot of the time with Northern jobs, I think it matters less. I think with Southern jobs, people want you to be a part of their community because these programs in a different kind of way are your community. And I think that that's the bigger thing. There are plenty of Northern, Marcus Freeman, who we've talked about, right? There are plenty of Northern coaches who aren't of Baton Rouge, who aren't of Louisiana, who I think could do a perfectly good job of handling this kind of situation. But I like what John said, when you don't feel an authentic intent to engage and be a part of the community, I think that actually can cost you years off of your job.
Yeah. As you guys said, the program's set up for success. And I hate to sound so simple-minded, but you could bring in a great high school coach and they will win there. Coaching is coaching, but I think we overstate just like, well, you don't have any FBS experience. You don't have any recruiting experience. These guys, if they're eager enough and they're a sponge and they want to learn and they bring the right people around them to challenge them, you're going to be successful. And a lot of the coaches out there that have been successful are the ones that always challenge themselves, that always bring around people that, that old saying of, I want to be in a room surrounded by people who are smarter than me, that will make me better because they're better. The
greatest inefficiency, maybe not even just in college football coaching, but like in life in a lot of ways, is humility. And I think that with a lot of these coaches that come in, especially the ones with giant contracts, like I saw the difference between Jimbo Fisher at Florida State versus Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, where he felt like he had nothing to prove, where he felt like I get to be God in this room. And I think that that's something interesting too, whenever these guys maybe head on to their next job, is what does a motivated in a different kind of way? What does a humbled Brian Kelly look like? I don't know. I'm curious.
As someone put it to me once, like, in no other like aspect of life, certainly not in the business world, do you get guaranteed like $70 million regardless of results. And this was pointed out to me, and it's true. Like, there are some guys, I think the guys who succeed, they're wired like psychos basically, where that almost doesn't impact them. Like Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, guys like that. The money is nice and they like it, but it does not intrinsically change them. I think there are other coaches who, you give them 50 million guaranteed, they're like, I'm pretty good. Like, I'm going to do my thing. And like, I get fired. I get fired. I get 50 mil. Let's go. And like, I think that could impact all of us. Like, like we work in an industry where like you get cut at any moment. We're having to grind every day. If I had 50 million guaranteed, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be on this show right now.
It's Sunday night.
Sunday night. I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine and take it easy.
Timing us.
Hey, and that's a dangerous part about these coaches who were just fired with the big buyouts, in my opinion. The retreads, that they can go land another job somewhere at a mid-tier program and not do a good job there because they'll just be like, F this, I'm better than this.
Yeah. It has actually rarely worked. I'd have to pull the stats, but when we have seen though, like, was a guy at a big school, drops down the level after getting fired. I think Richard, you made a joke earlier, but dumb people like us initially celebrate those kind of hires. Like, ooh, Kansas and Les Miles. Ooh, I like this. They like never.
Charlie Strong at South Florida. Like there are a lot of examples of this. Yeah.
Yeah. You're exactly right. All right.
You want to kind of catch a guy jumping up, not falling down.
Yeah. It's sometimes you go into coaching and you realize anybody can turn into Chandler Parsons if they're given enough money.
All right, you guys, we're going to end it with this because I did this kind of in the morning podcast and peeved everybody off. And I'm going to do it now again. I'm going to do it again.
Come on, we got to get Hummer back on to drag him back into this.
Yeah, by the way, John, I'm so disappointed. We're not going to get my hot seat primary with OU and LSU now.
I know. I'm still stealing that at some point. I'll use it for something.
There'll be another one.
Find another.
But I'm going to put you in the role of LSU athletics director. Who is your top target at this moment for the LSU head coaching job?
Lane Kiffin.
Well, he stole Lane.
if I'm Scott Woodward, and I don't think he would do this. So I'll just say, if I'm John Talty, LSU AD, I'm going all in. I'm trying to hire Lane Kiffin, and I'm asking him to bring Ed O as his defensive line coach. And let's just get cooking. Like, let's do the thing. We'll have some recruiting studs. We'll have the infrastructure. If you're bringing Lane, you'd want to bring his GM, Billy Glasscock. If you're going outside of Lane, I'd probably want to keep Austin Thomas, their current GM, who has worked with Lane in the past, but also left Ole Miss for LSU. But that's where I start. I try to see if Lane's interested. It gets trickier, I think, after that.
I think that if you are so obsessed with somebody who fits your culture and your community, and as Shahan was talking about, you are willing to humble yourself, John Summerall is right down the road. But you don't want to do it because you don't want to hire the Tulane coach because you're too big for Tulane. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's a guy I'd hire, and I would make it very clear to him, we want you. Come here when your season's over with. What's going to take for you not to listen to Auburn? What will it take for you to not potentially listen to Ole Miss? Right. What do we have to do to make sure you're the next head coach at LSU?
I think that these are the two kind of smartest approaches to this. I think that with me, especially after coming off of Brian Kelly and the giant contract and the money, like, I would really want to hire a hungry John Summerall. Like, I would really want to give him what it takes. I mean, that dude, go back and look at Troy's records from the 2 years before he was there to when he took the job. He went, I think, 23-2 with 2 Sun Belt titles in those 2 years. Immediately went to Tulane.
23-4. Sorry, 23-4. Just.
And listen,
wait, never mind. I don't want all that.
You're out on him now, right? You're out on him now.
He took over a Troy program that was absolutely in the dumps after
they had lost
Lindsey.
2 straight
they were
seasons.
In the dumps.
Yeah, 2 straight losing seasons. This was not Neil Brown Troy that he took over. Immediately gets them back, not just to winning, but the top of the Sun Belt, which is a good league. And Troy does not have a ton of advantages versus other teams in that conference. Goes to Tulane. They're right there in the American title race last year. They're right back in it this year. The thing that also gets me about Summerall, man, is like, he's a defensive coach. He's a tough physical coach, but like, they just keep finding dudes on offense, man. Like Darian Mensah, Mekhi Hughes, Kamani Vidal, like they just keep doing it over and over and over again. And when you have somebody who has that kind of mind for player identification and deployment, like I'm very excited to see where he ends up, because I think he's going to have a lot of success anywhere he goes.
I say John Summerall. Yes, that's a guy I'd go after, but I would still float it out to Nick Saban of, hey, 3-year contract, $25 million a year, $75 million guaranteed, 3 years. That's it. Ride off into the sunset. I would just throw it out there to him, see what he says.
No, I would too. I mean, he's the first call that I would make. I mean, obviously there's plenty of mutual connections there, intermediaries, like that's, you can make that call and you can feel it out and make sure, hey, you sure you're retired? You sure about that?
Actually, you know what? Yeah, you sure about that? You sure about that? I would call Miss Terry and discuss the business with her first, and then have her bring it up to Nick and see how that goes. Okay. Chad is asking about, producer Aaron says that Chad is asking about John Gruden.
Brandon, that's you, man.
John Gruden,
get out of my face, bro.
Wasn't a particularly good NFL coach at the end and hadn't won a Super Bowl in 20 years when they hired him to be the coach of the Raiders.
No.
I will say I would hire John Gruden at a non-traditional job.
Oh, cool. UAB can do the
thing
over.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider that. I mean, like, here's the thing.
I need to FOIA all of the negative recruiting of just coaches sending his emails to every recruit, because that would go crazy.
Listen, I'm not gonna deny there are some real issues there. I'm just saying the idea of a John Gruden. If I was at a smaller school, I can see why UAB tried Trent Dilfer. It ended horribly. It was disastrous in every way. But if you're at a smaller school and you say, we always struggle to fundraise, even when we're winning, we're not selling out. You have all these different issues. You say, hey, if I can get a guy who can get us a lot of attention, can we elevate beyond? Can he bring in new, like, for instance, look at what Dion did with Jackson State initially. In part, I think because of he's Dion, but also the Barstool connection. Like, if you're, say, I don't know, UMass and you hire John Gruden, you're going to get a lot of Barstool attention that UMass is never getting otherwise. I don't go down a rabbit hole that I don't even want to go down, and I kind of wish I could retract everything I just said.
To close this out for
Please
good.
don't aggregate. Please don't aggregate.
to close this out for good, because this is not the UAB podcast, although I would love to have one at one point. I think that the biggest mistake that UAB made was thinking that anybody cares about Trent Dilfer.
I think John Gruden's a much bigger name, though.
I think Gruden is more of that. Trent Dilfer was trying to hire Dion if nobody cared about Dion.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a pin in this John Gruden thing. The thing is like I don't think he would even entertain a job unless it was some big job, and no big job is going to be like he's our top guy. Let's go get him. It's just I just don't see that. I don't even know if UAB just came all in on him. I don't even know if he would even listen to it. I really don't. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this emergency podcast. We did not quite expect this to happen, especially this late on a Sunday night, but that's the world of college football, friends. We are up to $167.9 million in total buyout money across the FBS, maybe a little bit lower if they negotiate things down with Mr. Brian Kelly, so it's not as big as everybody thinks, but we are most definitely heading towards a situation where we're going to easily surpass $200 million in buyout money with all these firings. And of course, there are coaches out there who might just be stepping away at the end of the year, not wanting to be part of this whole new system with revenue sharing and NIL. So again, I know we say it pretty much on every episode, but this is going to be the wildest coaching carousel silly season we have ever had. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or if I should just run into the ocean, but it's going to happen. There is no way to avoid it. And we're going to be here with you, holding your hand through it all and crying and laughing and smiling along the way. I am Brendan Marcello for Shahan Jayaraja, John Talty, and Richard Johnson. This has been the College Football Insiders. We will see you down the road.